I showed up to my brother's engagement party with a check for $8,000 in my coat pocket and left with it still there, after my mother told the entire room that my plus one could sit at the kids' table because there just wasn't space. 3 weeks later, I didn't renew the lease on their townhouse. That's where the story really starts. Make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss what happens. We'd love to know, where in Canada are you watching from today? Drop it in the comments. The engagement party was held at a private dining room at a restaurant in downtown Ottawa called Maison Lefebvre, the kind of place with cloth napkins folded into swans and a sommelier who whispers. My brother had been dating his fiancée for 8 months. 8 months. I had been paying 40% of my parents' rent for 4 years. I want you to understand something before I tell you what happened that night. I didn't go to that dinner angry. I went hopeful. I always went hopeful. That was the problem. I'm a forensic accountant. I work with corporate litigation firms across Ontario, and I am very good at my job. I am precise, I am patient, and I have an uncomfortably high tolerance for things that don't add up, which, when I think about it, explains a lot about how long I lasted in my family before I finally did the math. I'd booked the private room myself. My mother had called me 3 weeks earlier, breathless with excitement, telling me my brother had finally proposed and that she wanted to celebrate properly. She used the word properly, the way she always did, as a hint that I was expected to make it happen. I called the restaurant, I arranged the set menu, I put a deposit on 2 bottles of champagne, and I quietly slid a cashier's check for $8,000 into an envelope addressed to both my parents. It was supposed to be a contribution toward the wedding, their share of costs, since my brother certainly wasn't going to come up with it himself. I took the train in from my apartment in Gatineau. It was February, properly cold, the kind of Ottawa cold that gets into the gap between your scarf and your collar and doesn't leave. I was wearing the charcoal wool blazer I save for occasions where I need to feel competent, which had become, honestly, most family events. When I walked into Maison Lefebvre, the private room was already full. My parents were there. My brother and his fiancée at the center of attention as expected, and 3 of my aunts and uncles who I hadn't been told were coming. That wasn't a surprise exactly. My mother had a habit of expanding guest lists without informing the person paying for the room. What was a surprise was the seating. There were 10 chairs at the table, 10 place settings, all occupied. I counted them from the doorway with the automatic reflex of someone who had spent her adult life counting things that didn't add up. My mother looked up when I came in, smiled the kind of smile she reserved for when she needed me to not make a scene, and said, "Oh good, you made it. We saved you a spot." She gestured toward a small side table near the service station, a two-top normally used for overflow, with a single chair and a place setting that had clearly been added as an afterthought. My partner, who had taken the train with me and was standing just behind my shoulder in the doorway, went very still. "Where am I supposed to sit?" I asked, keeping my voice even. "Well," my mother said, "we didn't realize Lynn was bringing a guest, and there just wasn't space. I told you I was bringing someone. I told you 2 weeks ago. You know how it is. Things fill up." She waved her hand, the gesture she uses when a conversation is becoming inconvenient. "He can sit at the side table with you. Or honestly, there's room near the server station if you just pull another chair over. It's not a big deal." My brother glanced over from across the table. He didn't say anything. His fiancée gave me a small, apologetic look that I appreciated, and that changed nothing. My partner put his hand deep in the small of my back. Just a touch. It wasn't comfort exactly. It was a question. "Do you want to leave?" We had developed that particular language over 3 years together, a whole vocabulary that didn't require words. I didn't leave, not yet. I sat at the side table. My partner sat beside me. We ate our amuse-bouche in the acoustic shadow of the main table, close enough to hear the conversation, but at an angle that made clear we weren't quite part of it. My mother laughed loudly at something my brother said. The sommelier opened the champagne I had ordered and poured it for the people at the main table first. then glanced over at me with a look of professional neutrality. At some point during the second course, my uncle leaned across the table and said, loudly enough to carry, "So Lynn, when are you and what's his name? When are you two getting serious? Your brother's already ahead of you." The table laughed. My mother smiled into her glass. I excused myself to the washroom and stood at the sink for 2 minutes looking at the envelope in my blazer's inside pocket. $8,000. I had pulled it together from a savings account I'd been building for 18 months, skipping the kitchen renovation I'd been planning, eating through my discretionary budget, like it was a resource to be conserved rather than enjoyed. I had wanted to give them something real, something that said, "I am here, I am part of this, I matter at this table." I thought about the last 4 years. The automatic transfer that left my account on the first of every month for my parents' rent. The call from my mother 2 years ago when my father's arthritis made it impossible for him to work full shifts, and the way she'd framed it not as a request, but as an obvious next step. "You're the one with the stable income, Lynn." The CERB period, when my brother had collected every available support payment and still somehow ended up owing money to people my parents wouldn't name, and the $5,000 I'd quietly transferred to make whatever that was go away. No questions asked. Because my mother said it would destroy the family if it came out. I put the envelope back in my pocket. I went back to the side table and finished my dinner. When the dessert course came, I signaled the server. Asked them to transfer the remaining champagne and the bill for the room to my father's credit card. The one I had co-signed for him 3 years ago because his credit rating wouldn't qualify on its own. And told them to remove me from the tab entirely. The server nodded with the practiced calm of someone who has seen every variation of family dinner go sideways. I stood up, put on my coat, and told my partner quietly that we were leaving. My mother looked up. "Where are you going? We haven't done the toast yet." "I'm sure it'll be wonderful," I said. Congratulations to the happy couple. I didn't say anything about the envelope. I just walked out. The cold hit me on the sidewalk like a reminder that I had a body that existed outside of that room. My partner didn't ask questions. We walked to the nearest coffee shop, ordered teas we didn't really want, and sat in a window booth watching the Parliament Hill lights reflect off the snow. "You okay?" he said eventually. "I don't know yet," I said. That was honest. I didn't know yet. Something had shifted, but I couldn't tell if it was the beginning of something or the end of something. And I had learned not to make decisions in the gap between those two things. We took a cab home. I didn't look at my phone until the next morning. 17 missed calls. My mother had called 4 times, my father twice, my brother once. The rest were from aunts and cousins I hadn't spoken to in months, all of them apparently informed by midnight that I had ruined the evening by leaving before the toast. My brother's text said, "What is wrong with you?" Her parents were there. It was embarrassing. My mother's last voicemail, left at 12:43 a.m., said, "Lynn, I don't know what's gotten into you lately. You didn't even say goodbye to Aunt Carol. You're becoming very selfish, and I think you need to look at that. Also, did you cancel the room charge? Because your father's card was declined, and they're saying there's a balance owing. Call me." I made coffee. I sat at my kitchen table in the gray February morning light, and I thought about the word selfish. I had been the financial architecture of my family's stability for 4 years, and nobody had used the word generous. But the moment I didn't pay for a dinner I'd been excluded from, I was selfish. I opened my laptop and pulled up the property management portal for my parents' townhouse in Canada. I had signed the lease 3 years ago as the primary leaseholder and guarantor. My parents were listed as co-occupants. The arrangement had been presented to me as temporary, just until your father's disability claim comes through, Lynn. It'll be 6 months at most, and had simply never ended, the way temporary arrangements in families rarely do. I paid 40% of the monthly rent. Their OAS and my father's eventual partial disability payments covered the rest, barely. The lease renewal notice was sitting in my email. It had arrived 10 days ago. I hadn't signed it yet. I looked at the renewal button for a long time. I thought about the $8,000 check in my blazer pocket, still uncashed, meant for people who had seated me at the overflow table at my own expense. I thought about the word selfish. I clicked on the option to flag the renewal for review and drafted a letter to the property management office, indicating that I would not be continuing as primary leaseholder or guarantor, and that the remaining occupants would need to qualify independently or arrange alternative accommodation. Per the lease terms, I was required to give 60 days' notice, which I did. I sent the letter. Then I went for a walk by the river, because I needed air, and because I had learned that the moments when you do something irreversible are better processed outside. What happened next did not happen all at once. It unraveled over about 10 days, the way things do when a family has been held together by money rather than honesty, and the money stops moving. My mother called 11 times the day the property management office sent the formal notice. I let them all go to voicemail. My father texted once, "Lynn, please call your mother." My brother texted, "Are you actually doing this? You're going to make them homeless." I noted that he didn't offer to co-sign anything himself. I did not respond. I was, for the first time in a long time, doing something that resembled looking after myself, and I found it required most of my attention. On the fourth day, I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. I answered it by accident, thinking it was a client. It was my aunt, my mother's older sister, calling from her landline in Mississauga. She told me that my mother had posted on Facebook about the situation and that the family was very concerned. She said my mother had described it as an eviction, which technically it was, and that several relatives were saying I had lost my mind and turned my back on family values. I thanked her for calling. I said I understood there were two versions of the story and that I respected her concern. I asked if she had spoken to my brother about the situation, and there was a brief pause that told me the answer was no. Because my brother's behavior was not under review in this family. It never had been. I said I hoped she had a good week, and I ended the call. That evening, I sat at my kitchen table and did what I do when I need to think clearly. I opened a spreadsheet. I went back 4 years. I calculated what I had transferred in rent contributions. I calculated the $5,000 I had sent to cover my brother's unnamed debt. I calculated the cost of the 2 flights I had booked for my parents to visit my father's sister in Halifax when she was ill, because they said they couldn't afford it. I calculated the anniversary dinner I had funded 2 years ago, the birthday party I had organized for my mother's 60th, the car insurance payment I had covered for 3 months when my father's account was overdrawn. The total, laid out in a column in 11-point calibri, was not something I was prepared for. Even doing this work professionally, even having known abstractly that I had been contributing 4 years, the number sitting there in the cell at the bottom of the column was clarifying in the way that very cold water is clarifying. I hadn't been helping my family. I had been funding a lifestyle that didn't include a seat at the table for me. I called a colleague the next morning, a woman I trust who does civil litigation. I asked her, professionally and specifically, what my options were regarding the co-signed credit card, the lease transition, and whether there was any actionable issue around the $5,000 I had transferred to resolve my brother's situation 3 years ago. She walked me through it. The lease was straightforward. I had followed proper notice protocol. The credit card co-signature could be dissolved with documentation, which I filed. The $5,000 was murkier, but she told me what to keep. I didn't tell anyone I had made that call. What I did instead was wait. I had learned in my work that information has the most impact when it is presented in the right room at the right time. And I knew that in approximately 2 weeks, my cousin was hosting a family gathering, a belated holiday dinner, the kind of extended family event my mother treated as a performance space where she was always the lead. My mother had been telling her version of this story for 10 days. She had a head start, but I had documentation. I arrived at my cousin's house in Barhaven on a Saturday afternoon in late February, carrying a bottle of Niagara ice wine and a USB drive. My cousin opened the door with a look that was equal parts relief and apprehension. "You came," she said. "Of course," I said. The living room held about 20 people: aunts, uncles, cousins, my parents, my brother, and his fiancée. My mother was seated in the armchair she always gravitates toward at family events, the one with the best sightlines and the most room to hold court. When she saw me, she did what she always does when she needs to control a narrative. She got there first. "Lynn," she said loudly, in the voice she uses when she wants an audience. "I'm glad you're here. I was hoping we could talk like adults about what's been happening. Your father and I are very stressed." "I'd like that," I said. "I think the family should hear this." She hadn't expected agreement. That was the first moment I saw something flicker behind her eyes. Not quite fear, but its cousin. My cousin has a TV in the living room with an HDMI port. I had confirmed this in advance. I asked if I could use it for a moment, framing it casually, and my cousin looked mildly puzzled but said yes. I plugged in the drive. I didn't make a speech. I am an accountant. I believe in letting numbers speak. I pulled up the spreadsheet first, 4 years of transfers, itemized, totaled. I walked the room through it quietly, the way I would walk a client through findings. Not dramatically, just clearly. My uncle said, "Lynn, is that accurate?" "I can provide the bank statements if anyone would like to verify," I said. My mother said, "That's completely out of context. We paid her back for most of that." She looked at my father. "We paid her back. Tell them." My father, who had been sitting very still since I arrived, looked at the floor. "Dad," I said gently, "did we discuss repayment?" He didn't answer. That was its own answer. I moved to the second document. This was where the room got quiet in a different way. 3 months before the engagement party, my brother had sent my mother a series of text messages asking her to help him cover a debt. Not to dangerous people, as it turned out. I had done some checking, but to a credit union that had flagged his account. The texts which my father had forwarded to me 2 days earlier after a long and very difficult phone call during which he had cried in a way I hadn't heard since I was a child, showed my mother coaching my brother on how to approach me for the money. "Tell her it's serious. Tell her there are people involved. She'll give it if she thinks it's urgent. She always does." The $5,000 I had transferred to help, she had suggested it. She had known what it was. She had framed it to me as a crisis and framed it to my brother as a strategy. I put the texts on the screen. My brother stood up. "Those are private. They were sent on a family group thread that Dad was included on," I said. "He shared them." "That's not a privacy violation. Mum was just trying to help. She was trying to access my savings using my concern for you as a mechanism," I said. "Those are different things." The room was very quiet. My aunt from Mississauga, the one who had called me, was looking at my mother with an expression I had never seen on her face before. My mother said, "I can't believe you're doing this. At a family gathering. You're humiliating us." "You posted about our family situation on Facebook to 63 people," I said. "This is smaller." She didn't have an answer for that. My father stood up. He looked like a man who had been carrying something for a very long time and had just decided to put it down, regardless of what it cost him. "She's right," he said. His voice was rough. "Lenny's right. We asked too much of her and we didn't treat her fairly. The engagement dinner." He stopped. "You should have had a seat at the table. I should have said something and I didn't." My mother looked at him. The mask slipped in a way that 30 years of family dinners had never quite exposed before. "Don't you dare," she said quietly. "I'm done," he said, simply without drama. "I'm done lying about it." The room stayed quiet for a long moment. My cousin, bless her, went to the kitchen and came back with tea for everyone, because some instincts run deep. Eventually, people talked. Not all of it was comfortable. My aunt said I could have handled it differently. I agreed with her and said I probably should have set limits years earlier, which would have made this conversation unnecessary. My uncle asked my brother directly if he was going to contribute to finding new housing, and the silence that followed was informative. My mother left early. She kissed no one on the way out. The townhouse was vacated at the end of the 60-day notice period. I hired a moving company, a small local operation out of Nepean, and paid for it. Not because I owed it, but because I knew my father couldn't manage the furniture alone and my brother wouldn't show up to help. And there are some choices you make because of who you are, not because of what people deserve. My brother moved into the new place with them briefly, then left for a friend's basement in Brampton within 2 weeks. The fiancé, as far as I know, is reconsidering some things. My parents found a smaller apartment in Kanata, a one-bedroom with subsidized rent they qualified for through a provincial seniors program my father had never known about because no one had looked. I found it. I sent him the application. He submitted it himself. My mother and I don't have dinner together. We text occasionally. She sends me articles about nutrition, and I send back single-word responses that give her nothing to escalate. It is not a relationship, exactly. It is the absence of damage, which is the closest we have managed. My father is different. It happens slowly, the way things that are real tend to happen. He got a part-time job doing bookkeeping for a small HVAC company in the West End. Someone who knew someone, a connection through his church. He called to tell me about it with a formality that suggested he was proud and slightly embarrassed by the pride, which I found unexpectedly moving. We have coffee about once a month at a diner near his new apartment. He always pays. I let him. Letting him pay is the most respectful thing I know how to do. Last month, he slid a check across the table, $250, made out to me. With installment 1, written on the memo line, he said, "At this rate, I'll have you paid back by the time I'm 93. I assume you'll wait." I looked at the check. I looked at him. "I'll wait," I said. I took the check. I deposited it. I didn't tear it up, and I didn't minimize it, because either of those things would have made it easier for him, and he doesn't need easier right now. He needs to pay it back, and I need to let him. And there is something in that exchange, the ordinariness of it, the accountability of it, that feels more like a relationship than anything we managed in the years I was making myself smaller and cheaper and more accommodating, trying to earn a seat that was never really offered. The $8,000 check is still in a drawer in my desk. I haven't cashed it. I haven't destroyed it either. I think about it sometimes, about what it was supposed to mean, that I was there, that I was part of it, that I mattered. I spent a long time trying to buy my way into that feeling. It turns out you can't. The seat either exists or it doesn't, and if someone has to be guilted or paid into saving it for you, then it wasn't really yours to begin with. I went for a run this morning along the river path, past the ice that's just starting to break up at the edges the way it does in March in Ottawa. The cold was different. Still sharp, but with the particular quality of cold that comes before warmth rather than after it. I've been running more lately. It's a small thing, but it's mine.